The HOA bylaw said, and I am reading this word for word, no food trucks permitted within the boundaries of Maplewood Estates. So I read it again, and again, one more time, and I realized something that the person who wrote that bylaw had not thought about. It said no food trucks. It did not say anything about a vehicle legally registered under the name food truck. So I went to the DMV. I changed my registration, and I parked in my driveway every single day for 6 months. And every single day, the HOA president came to my door, and every single day, I showed her the registration. This is not a food truck. This is food truck. My vehicle, named food truck, completely allowed. Before this story goes any further, and I want you to know, it gets so much better from here. Welcome to HOAgoneTooFar. This channel exists for every person. Who has ever had an HOA write a rule that made absolutely no sense and enforce it like it was the law of the universe? Subscribe right now. Ring that bell, because we find the people who fought back in the most creative ways possible, and we tell their stories every single week. I need to tell you about the truck first, because without understanding what that truck meant, what it represented, what it had taken to get it, and build it, and keep it running, none of the rest of this story makes the kind of sense it deserves to make. My name is Marcus Webb. I am 38 years old. I spent 7 years working in commercial kitchens, line cook, then sous chef, then head chef at a restaurant that closed during the pandemic, and took most of my professional world with it when it went. I spent 6 months after that closure figuring out what came next. I had savings. Not much, but some. I had skills. And I had an idea that I had been carrying around in the back of my mind for 3 years. An idea that the restaurant job had always made impractical, but that the closed restaurant had suddenly made possible. A food truck. Not a franchise. Not a corporate concept. Something completely mine. The menu, the branding, the schedule. Every decision made by exactly one person who cared about every single detail. I found the truck on a Tuesday morning. A 2018 commercial kitchen vehicle, used but well-maintained, with a full hood system and a prep area that was smaller than I would have liked, but workable if I was disciplined about the setup. I bought it with everything I had saved in a small business loan that I signed for, with the specific calm of someone who has decided that this is the bet worth making. I spent 3 months outfitting it, every weekend, and most weeknights, in the driveway of the house I rented in the Maplewood Estates community, turning a used food service vehicle into something I was genuinely proud of. The truck was called the Rolling Kitchen. Hand-painted signage. I did it myself. 3 attempts before I was happy with it. A menu that changed weekly based on what looked good at the farmer's market. A small social media following that started with 0 and grew slowly and honestly through word of mouth from people who had actually eaten food. I operated the truck at permitted locations around the city. Farmers markets, corporate lunch spots, a Thursday evening rotation at a local brewery. None of it happened at my house. None of it happened in my driveway or on my street. The truck came home to sleep the same way any vehicle comes home at the end of a working day. That was the part the HOA had a problem with. The HOA president of Maplewood Estates was a woman named Brenda Fitch. Brenda was 57 years old and had been president for 4 years and approached the position with the specific dedication of someone who considers neighborhood aesthetics a moral issue rather than a preference. Brenda did not like the truck. I knew this before she ever said it directly. The looks when she drove past, the way her pace slowed on her evening walks when she went by my driveway, the expression of someone cataloging a problem and deciding what to do about it. The first official contact came 6 weeks after I bought the truck. A letter, HOA letterhead, formally typed. It informed me that a neighbor had raised concern about the commercial vehicle parked in my driveway and that the HOA board had reviewed the community guidelines in response. It cited Section 7, Paragraph 4 of the Maplewood Estates Community Standards document. No commercial vehicles may be stored or regularly parked within the residential boundaries of Maplewood Estates, including but not limited to delivery trucks, commercial vans, and food trucks. I read it twice. Food trucks. Specifically, someone had written food trucks into this bylaw. I called Brenda directly. I explained that the truck was my business vehicle, the equivalent of a contractor's work van or a landscaper's trailer. I parked at my house because it was my house, and the truck was mine, and that was where vehicles go when the workday is done. Brenda listened politely and told me that the community guidelines were clear, and that commercial vehicles of any kind created an aesthetic inconsistency with the residential character of the neighborhood. I understand your concern, I told her, but I need somewhere to park my vehicle. Perhaps a commercial storage facility, she said, would be a more appropriate solution. I thanked her for the call and hung up, and then I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, looking at the letter, thinking about the truck in my driveway, and thinking about Section 7, Paragraph 4. No food trucks. The bylaw said no food trucks. It did not say anything about a vehicle named food truck. I got up from the table, made a cup of coffee, sat back down, read the bylaw one more time, and then I started smiling. Let me walk you through the logic, because the logic matters. It is the difference between a petty response and a genuinely airtight one. And I needed it to be airtight because I knew Brenda well enough to know that she would look for every possible angle to push back. The bylaw prohibited food trucks. The word food truck, in standard usage, refers to a commercial food service vehicle used to prepare and sell food. My truck was that. The rolling kitchen was a commercial food service vehicle. Brenda had a point. Technically, literally, the bylaw applied, but the bylaw was written about a category of vehicle, not a specific vehicle name. And vehicle names, the registered names of personal property, are a matter of legal record that the owner controls. I spent 2 evenings researching the relevant statutes for my state. Vehicle registration, name changes for title property, the legal distinction between a vehicle's category and its registered name. I am not a lawyer, but I am someone who had spent 7 years running a professional kitchen, someone who understood systems, who understood the difference between the letter of a rule and the spirit of it, and who had learned through years of service that the people who wrote the rules rarely anticipated every possible interpretation. Brenda had written no food trucks. She had not written no vehicles named food truck. Those are different things. I called a friend of mine named Ray who worked at the county clerk's office. Not to ask for anything improper, just to ask a practical question about the vehicle registration process and whether there was any legal restriction on a registered name of a privately owned vehicle. Ray thought about it for a moment. You can name your car pretty much whatever you want, he said, as long as it is not obscene or misleading for official purposes. Why? No reason, I said. Marcus, Ray said slowly. I will explain later. I told him. I went to the DMV on a Thursday morning. I brought the title, the registration, my identification, and a form requesting a name change for the registered vehicle. The clerk at window 4 was a woman named Patricia, who had the efficient patience of someone who has processed every conceivable type of paperwork for 15 years and has genuinely stopped being surprised by anything. She looked at my form. New registered name for the vehicle, she read. Food truck. That is correct, I said. She looked at me over the top of her reading glasses for exactly 3 seconds. Food truck, she repeated. Food truck, I confirmed. She looked back at the form, typed something into her computer, looked at the screen, typed again. There is no restriction on this name, she said. I did not think it would be, I said. She processed the paperwork without further comment, printed the new registration document, handed it to me with the particular neutrality of a government employee who has decided that whatever is happening here is not her concern. I held the registration in my hands. The vehicle previously registered as Rolling Kitchen was now, legally, officially, in the records of the state, a vehicle named Food Truck. Not a food truck. Food Truck. A proper name. A registered name. The name of my vehicle, as recorded by the relevant government authority, which was the only authority that actually mattered in a question about what a vehicle was named. I drove home, parked Food Truck in my driveway, went inside, and then I wrote Brenda a letter. It was polite. It was brief. It acknowledged the community guidelines she had cited. It expressed my genuine desire to be a cooperative resident. And it informed her that I had reviewed the relevant bylaw carefully and had taken steps to ensure that my vehicle was in full compliance with Section 7, Paragraph for the Maplewood Estates Community Standards. I attached a copy of the new registration. The registered name of the vehicle currently parked in my driveway was Food Truck. Food Truck was not a food truck. Food Truck was a vehicle named Food Truck belonging to Marcus Webb, parked at his residence. The bylaw prohibited food trucks. My vehicle was not a food truck. My vehicle was named Food Truck. These were different things, and the bylaw addressed one of them and not the other. I signed the letter, sealed the envelope, and walked it to Brenda's mailbox personally. Then I went back inside and made dinner and waited.
Brenda arrived at my door 4 days after I delivered the letter. I had been expecting her. I had, in fact, been looking forward to it in the specific way that you look forward to something when you are very confident about how it is going to go. She was holding my letter. She was also holding a copy of the community guidelines. And she had the expression of a woman who had spent 4 days consulting with every resource available to her and had arrived at my door absolutely certain that she had found the counterargument. "Mr. Webb," she said, "I have reviewed your letter and I need to explain why it does not resolve the issue." "Of course," I said. "Would you like to come in?" She declined. This conversation was happening on the doorstep, which was fine with me. "The bylaw prohibits food trucks," she said. "Your vehicle is a food truck. The name you have registered it under does not change what it is." I nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that perspective," I said. "But the bylaw uses the term food truck as a noun, a category. My vehicle's registered name is food truck, a proper name. The bylaw prohibits vehicles in the category of food trucks. My vehicle is in the category of personal vehicles. It is named food truck. These are legally distinct." Brenda looked at me. "That is not how bylaws work," she said. "I am not sure that is correct," I said pleasantly. "But if you would like to pursue this further through the appropriate channels, I am happy to participate in that process. In the meantime, my vehicle, food truck, is parked in my driveway, which is where personal vehicles are permitted to be parked." She left. She came back 6 days later with a formal violation notice. I accepted it, read it carefully, and sent a written response the following day that restated the registered name argument with references to the relevant state vehicle registration statutes and the specific language of the bylaw. She sent another violation notice. I sent another response. This continued for approximately 3 weeks before Brenda escalated to what I assumed was her next available option, an HOA attorney. A letter arrived from a law firm, written in the language of people who bill by the hour and want you to understand that they are serious. The letter argued that the intent of the bylaw was clear regardless of the vehicle's registered name. I read it carefully. Then I called a friend of mine named Sarah who had passed the bar 2 years earlier and was working at a small firm in town. I explained the situation. She asked me to read her the bylaw language. I read it. There was a pause. "The bylaw says no food trucks," Sarah said. "Correct?" I said. "And your vehicle is registered as food truck. Capital F, capital T. A proper name." "Also correct," I said. Another pause. Longer this time. "Marcus," Sarah said, and I could hear the smile happening. "This is genuinely one of the most creative things I have encountered since passing the bar." "Is it legal?" I asked. "The bylaw is ambiguous at best," she said. "It prohibits a category of vehicle using common terminology. Your vehicle's registered name is that common terminology used as a proper noun. Any attempt to enforce this as written would require the HOA to prove that the intent of the bylaw extends to registered names, which is not what the bylaw says. They wrote a bad bylaw. That is their problem, not yours." Sarah sent a response to the HOA attorney. It was professional. It was thorough. It explained the distinction between a vehicle category and a registered vehicle name with considerably more legal precision than I had managed on my own. It noted that the bylaw as written did not support the enforcement action the HOA was pursuing and invited them to identify any specific statutory authority that would extend bylaw language to registered vehicle names. The HOA attorney's response arrived 3 weeks later. It was considerably shorter than his first letter. It suggested that the matter might benefit from a revision of the relevant bylaw language and indicated that the HOA board would be reviewing the community guidelines at their next scheduled meeting. Bylaw revision. They were going to rewrite the rule. I expected that. I had expected it from the beginning. The question was how long it would take them to do it and what would happen in the meantime. It took them 4 months. For months. For months during which food trucks sat in my driveway every evening and every morning. For months during which Brenda walked past twice a day on her evening and morning walks and looked at the truck, and then looked at my house and then kept walking. For months during which my neighbors, several of whom had found the whole situation genuinely entertaining from the beginning, waved at me with increasing warmth every time they saw me outside. One of them, a retired teacher named Harold who lived 2 houses down, knocked on my door one Saturday morning with a plate of cookies. "I want you to know," Harold said, handing me the cookies, "that you have made this neighborhood significantly more interesting." "I appreciate that," I said. "I have lived here for 11 years, Harold said. "I have never once looked forward to Brenda's morning walks as much as I do right now." I need to stop here for a second, because Harold with the cookies is my favorite detail in this entire story. And what happens when they finally rewrite that bylaw, and what I did in response, is even better. If you are watching HOAgoneTooFar for the first time right now, subscribe before we go any further. Ring that bell, because we find the most creative fighters and tell their stories every single week. You do not want to miss a single one. The revised bylaw arrived in the monthly HOA newsletter. I read it at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee on a Tuesday morning, the same way I read everything HOA related, carefully, completely, and with genuine attention to every word. The new language was considerably more detailed than the original. It prohibited, and I am summarizing here but only slightly, commercial food service vehicles of any kind, whether identified by category name or registered vehicle name, including but not limited to vehicles used for the preparation or sale of food to the public, regardless of how such vehicles were titled or registered with any government authority. They had tried to close the loophole. They had written 3 additional sentences to address a vehicle named food truck. They had revised their entire community standards document because of my truck. I finished my coffee, sat for a moment. Then I called Sarah. "They rewrote it," I told her. "I saw," she said. I had sent her the newsletter. "They are much more specific now." "Yes," I said. "Can they do this retroactively?" "They can change their bylaws," Sarah said. "Going forward, they cannot penalize you for past compliance with the previous bylaw. But going forward, this new language would cover your vehicle regardless of its registered name." "So, food truck has to go?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Food truck as a vehicle name no longer protects you under the new bylaw." "Yes," she said. "But Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said. "How attached are you to that specific vehicle?" I looked out my kitchen window, at food truck sitting in my driveway. "It is my livelihood," I said. "Right. So it has to park somewhere. And it currently parks at your house." "Correct. And the new bylaw prohibits commercial food service vehicles." "Also correct." "Marcus," Sarah said slowly, "what if it was not a commercial food service vehicle?" I was quiet for a moment. "Keep going," I said. "The bylaw defines a commercial food service vehicle as a vehicle used for the preparation or sale of food to the public. What if your vehicle was not used for the preparation or sale of food to the public? What if it was a personal vehicle that happened to have a kitchen in it? A personal vehicle that happened to have a kitchen in it." I looked at food truck again. The hood system, the prep counters, the serving window, all of it installed by me in a vehicle I owned, which I could modify and refit however I chose. "Sarah," I said, "you are about to tell me to decommission the commercial kitchen. I am telling you to consider what happens if a vehicle that previously contained a commercial kitchen no longer contains a commercial kitchen," she said carefully. "It would no longer be a commercial food service vehicle by any reasonable definition." I spent 3 weeks and $4,000 converting food truck. I pulled the hood system. I removed the commercial prep surfaces and replaced them with residential-grade countertops. I converted the commercial refrigeration to standard residential units. I installed a comfortable bench seat along one wall and added a small table. Food truck was no longer a commercial food service vehicle. Food truck was now, by every functional and legal definition, a personal vehicle. A converted camper-style personal vehicle, to be precise, the kind that families take on road trips and park in driveways all across America without anyone giving it a second look. I parked it in my driveway, and I sent Brenda another letter. This one included photographs of the interior modifications, a statement from the company that had done the conversion work certifying that the vehicle no longer contained commercial food preparation equipment, and a polite note explaining that my vehicle, which was still legally named food truck, no longer met the definition of a commercial food service vehicle under the revised bylaw and was therefore parked in full compliance with the updated community standards. I heard later from Harold that Brenda sat down when she read it. Right there in her kitchen. Just sat down. Harold seemed very pleased about this. HOA held an emergency board meeting. I know this because Harold attended it and reported back with the enthusiasm of someone who has been given front row seats to the most entertaining thing that has happened in his neighborhood in 11 years. The meeting, by Harold's account, lasted 2.5 hours. The primary topic was what to do about my vehicle. The secondary topic was how to write a bylaw that would address my vehicle without being so specific that it became unenforceable for other reasons. The board's attorney attended by phone. He apparently spent 40 minutes explaining the concept of reasonable bylaw construction and the difficulty of writing rules that could not be worked around by a sufficiently creative and determined resident. Harold described it as the most educational HOA meeting he had ever attended. I learned more about property law in 2 hours than I had in 11 years of living here, he told me. The HOA sent me a third letter. This one was different in tone from the previous correspondence, less certain, more careful, using language that Sarah described as the language of people who have consulted their attorney and been told to be very precise about what they are actually claiming. The letter argued that my vehicle, regardless of its interior modifications, was still fundamentally a commercial vehicle by virtue of its size, its appearance, and its history of commercial use. Sarah's response was thorough. It noted that the bylaw defined commercial food service vehicles by their use, not their appearance or history. It included photographs demonstrating that the vehicle contained no commercial food preparation equipment. It cited the conversion certification. And it pointed out that the HOA's argument that a vehicle's history of commercial use made it permanently a commercial vehicle would have significant implications for a large number of residents who drove former commercial vehicles that had been converted to personal use. The HOA attorney apparently found this argument persuasive, or at least found the exposure it created concerning enough to advise the board against pursuing it. The third letter was the last one I received. Food truck remained in my driveway, named food truck, containing a comfortable bench seat and a small table and 2 residential-grade refrigerators and no commercial food preparation equipment of any kind. I continued operating my food truck, the rolling kitchen, my actual commercial vehicle, at permitted locations around the city. I had acquired a commercial parking arrangement at a local business district that gave me a secure, legal, fully appropriate place to store the rolling kitchen overnight on operating days. The 2 vehicles were completely separate. The rolling kitchen was my business. Food truck was my personal camper-style vehicle that happened to be named food truck and happened to have previously been used commercially and happened to have been the subject of 6 months of HOA correspondence. Brenda did not run for HOA president in the following election. She announced in the spring newsletter that she was stepping back from the board to focus on personal pursuits. The announcement was gracious and said nothing about the previous 6 months. Harold told me she had taken up watercolor painting, which he considered an appropriate and much safer outlet for her considerable organizational energy. The new HOA president was a man named Kevin who had 3 kids, drove a minivan, and had the philosophy that the job of an HOA president was to fix potholes and organize the annual block party and otherwise leave people alone. Kevin knocked on my door his second week in office. "I just wanted to introduce myself," he said, "and to say, personally, that I think what you did was genuinely one of the funniest things I have ever heard of someone doing with a vehicle registration." "Thank you," I said. "Is it still named food truck?" "It is," I said. Kevin nodded seriously. "Good," he said. "I think it should always be named food truck." I thought about that for a moment. "Kevin," I said, "I think we're going to get along fine. Here is what I want you to take from this story. Not that HOA bylaws are always wrong. Not that you should spend your weekends finding technical loopholes in community documents. The lesson is simpler and, I think, more useful than either of those things. When someone writes a rule carelessly, when they use imprecise language, when they assume their intent is obvious, when they do not think through every possible interpretation, they have handed the person they are trying to restrict an opportunity. Read the rules. All the way through. Every word. Not because you are looking for a fight, but because understanding exactly what a rule says and exactly what it does not say is the most powerful tool available to anyone who wants to protect what is theirs. Brenda wrote no food trucks. She did not write no vehicles named food truck. Those are different things. And the difference between them is a trip to the DMV and the most satisfying 6 months of my professional life. Food truck is still in my driveway. I take it camping twice a year now. The bench seat is comfortable. The small table folds out perfectly for morning coffee. The hill country looks beautiful through the serving window, which I kept because it lets in excellent light. Some things are worth keeping. Before you go, I have one question. If an HOA told you that something completely legal, completely yours, completely paid for with your own money, was not allowed, would you fight back the way Marcus did? Would you find the loophole? Would you go to the DMV? Would you spend $4,000 converting a truck just to prove a point? Or would you do something even more creative than any of that? Tell me in the comments right now. I read every single one. And if your HOA has ever gone too far, I especially want to hear that story.